Today we're in Joshua chapter 11, and Joshua chapter 11 is also a very exciting chapter. I feel like I've been saying that for every chapter since the beginning, but Joshua 11 is exciting. But to put Joshua 11 into context, allow me to take us a little bit back to Joshua chapter 10, verse 28. And the NIV notes that from verse 28 downwards, it gives it a title that says Southern Cities Conquered, And I want you to see that by the time we're reading Joshua chapter 10, verse 28, now we are starting to name the number of cities that Joshua and the Israelites together have conquered. And there is Makeda, there is Libnah in verse 29, verse 31 has Lachish, verse 33 has Gezer, verse 34 has Eglon, 35 Hebron, 36 Hebron rather, 38 Deber, and all, verse 42 in chapter 10 says, all these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign because the God of Israel fought for Israel. So verse 11 now begins with naming the northern cities that they'd conquered, But let me read verse 11 from chapter 11 from verse 1 to verse 5. It says, when Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of this, he sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, to the kings of Shimron and Akshaph, and to the northern kings who were in the mountains, in the Arabah south of Kinnereth, in the western foothills, and in Naphoth Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and west, the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and to the Hivites below the Hermon, and in the region of Mizpah. Verse 4 is a very threatening verse. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Meron to fight against Israel. Yani, verse 11 is everybody ganging up against Israel. It is such a fearful thing. I don't know if we are seeing it, by the way. I don't even know if because we've not known war in our days, and I pray that we don't get to know war. But I think it's a huge threat if we woke up one day and the army of TZ, the army of Uganda, the army of Sudan, the army of Egypt, the army of... Imagine all those people fighting against... That's exactly what is happening here. Everybody is ganging up against one enemy, Israel. Verse 6, the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow, those words, by this time tomorrow, how in elections we say by 9 a.m. By this time tomorrow, I will hand all of them slain over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots. Yeah. Then I'll skip and go all the way to verse 10. Yeah. Verse 9, actually. Joshua did to them as the Lord had directed. He hamstrung their horses and burned, so he basically destroyed them. And at that time Joshua turned back and captured Hazor and put its king to the sword. And then verse 11, everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. Yeah. And then I'll continue and verse 14. The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and the livestock of these cities, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. As the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. I love that verse. As the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. And then this is the most favorite verse that you need to hear. It says, he left nothing undone of all the Lord commanded Moses. Joshua left nothing undone. Yeah. And then I'll skip all the way to verse 22. And it reads and says, no Anakites were left in Israelite territory. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive. Verse 23. So Joshua took the entire land just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But I want to put our focus on Joshua chapter 11, verse 14 and verse 15. The one that says, as the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded. I find the Message version puts it differently. It says this, it says, just as God commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He did not leave incomplete one thing that God had commanded Moses. I think it was a very uncomfortable thing to wake up every day to go to war. I think it was very disruptive. It was very disturbing even to see all these wars and see all these people lose their lives. But Joshua obeyed God to the letter. He did everything to the letter. He didn't leave incomplete any one thing that God had commanded him. I feel like today's scripture is a push for us to finish and to finish well. To finish the tasks that we are given and to finish them well. You know, and to help us see that, I see three things that we can draw from how Joshua did it. Number one is that I feel like Joshua had a deep comprehension. The Bible says, what God told Moses, it says here in verse 14, as the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. Like Joshua understood the assignment so much through generations. He listened to Moses, who had listened to God. Like he knew exactly what he needed to do. He had a deep comprehension for it. I feel like I want to say that finishing well requires us to have a deep understanding of what needs to be done. What has God asked you to do? Do you have an understanding of what calling, what assignment, what kind of send God has sent you with? Have you taken time to understand the assignment that you have in the season that you're in? Because that's where it begins. But number one is understanding, the second thing has to be commitment. Because I feel like it takes a lot of commitment to get through an exciting days, to power through days when Joshua felt like he didn't want to. I am so sure that nobody wakes up every day and they're ready to fight. I'm so sure that war is such a risky venture that you don't know if you go, will you come back alive? You know, the terrain that these guys used to fight was those countries are set in dry conditions. I'm sure there are days Joshua would wake up and be like, can somebody just take me to the spa? You know, I just want a massage, you know? But it takes a lot of discipline to do things, especially when we don't feel like doing them. And finishing well has that episode where we have to commit to the assignment. So there's understanding the assignment, but there's committing to the assignment. Joshua fought. Even when he was miles away and the Gibeonites called him and they're like, come, in chapter 10, he came and fought. When countries had ganged up against him, like we're seeing in chapter 11, he still fought. Every day he woke up and committed to the same assignment, which was to settle the children of Israel. And finally, I think if we start with comprehension, then we look at understanding the assignment, which is comprehending it. Number 2 is a deep commitment. But number 3, it has to be a deep concern. There is a level of understanding what it is that you've been asked to do that is called concern. Concern is when you understand what is at stake if you don't do what you're meant to do. Understanding is when you're like, okay, this is the task, sawa. Concern is when you're at the level of knowing, if I don't do this task, this is what is at stake. And you know what was at stake for Joshua if he didn't finish his assignment? Is that the children of Israel would never have settled. This thing called the promised land would have been an illusion that would never have come if Joshua was not faithful. And even that meant that if this thing never came, that's not even the concern. The concern is that the name of God was going to be in the test. And people were going to look at God shallowly because it's like, Yanni, which God is this who didn't get you guys to where he promised that he was going to get you at? When we understand that the name of God is at stake, when we understand that this assignment, there are so many of us, by the way, who are Christians, who are employed in different places. And imagine, every time we do well, people clap for us. Every time we do wrong, guess what people say? Na nasemanga yeni, Mkristo. Look at them, they normally say they are Christians. Yeah? Every time we don't understand what is at stake, every time we don't finish well, we don't do things with excellence and with the concern of what is at stake, then what happens is that the name of God is looked at, and it's looked at in vain. That's what Joshua understood. I hope that this puts you in a place today where you can sit down at home and reflect. Do you have a deep comprehension of the assignment God has given you? Have you committed deeply to it? Are you concerned deeply about the things that God is concerned about? It's not your name. It's the name of God that is at stake. I remember when we used to succeed in exams in high school. Hey, that time, people are like, oh, these guys were saved. Oh, yeah, God is moving in their lives. You wait until you get an E. And I'm not putting pressure on anyone. I'm just saying that when we understand what is at stake, we move differently. No wonder Joshua was encouraged to make sure that he did everything God asked him to do and did it to the letter. I hope that you do your assignment to the letter and that you do it excellently. Whether that's something you need to do today, whether that's a season you're in right now, maybe you're in school, maybe you're employed somewhere, maybe you run a business. Can your clients say that you actually understand? You listen to them, you understand what they need, and you do it to the letter. Can your clients say that? Those of us who are pastors, and maybe you're a pastor and you're listening to this channel, we know what is at stake. And sometimes there's no place where there's so much, like we don't do things as well as we'd love to do them, like in churches. We need to learn to be excellent in whatever call God has given us. To be excellent and to be people who complete every assignment pass to the letter. Be encouraged, go and shine, go and excel, go and do what you need to do. Do great things, dare greatly for the sake of the name of God. Thank you and have a fantastic day. God bless you.